I love my coffee. I cannot start my day without a coffee or two. How about you? Cafes and the coffee culture are part of Melbourne's DNA as a city as well. Yet the coffee that we all enjoy is produced via human rights abuses. The same is true with so many of the everyday foods and clothes we all enjoy. As a result of globalization, many businesses' supply chains now go through multiple countries, multiple social, legal, and human rights settings. Often, the eventual consumer, us, are disconnected from where and how our products and foods are made and sourced from. In this topic, we discuss the implications of these globalized supply chains for human rights. Consider three popular industries that we are all consumers of: coffee, chocolate, and clothes. Each of these industries, and many more, that we are all consumers of actually have supply chains that wrap around the globe involving several countries, and in these supply chains are some profound human rights concerns. The black coffee beans that we enjoy in our $4 cups of coffee start their life as green beans on trees in far-flung places like Mexico, Guatemala, Kenya, and Ethiopia. These beans are picked by hand, frequently by exploitative labour, including child labourers. Forests are sometimes felled in order to plant fields of coffee, and farmers are sometimes not paid fair wages and prices for their coffee beans. Fact is, the vast majority of coffee is consumed in developed countries like Australia, but produced in developing countries, with sometimes murky labour and human rights standards, and even weaker enforcement. So what is being done about this? Well, pleasingly, there's a fair bit being done by civil society groups like the Fair Trade Movement, the Ethical Sourcing Initiative, and by coffee companies themselves, including the likes of Starbucks and Nestle. These companies have acknowledged their impacts on human rights of labourers and farmers in their supply chains. They've acknowledged the inequities and implemented a variety of steps to improve the working conditions of farmers, farm labourers that produce those precious coffee beans. The same story repeats itself. Just pick the industry: solar panels, computer chips, clothes, chocolate. Indeed, Nestle was actually recently sued in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit in the United States for the presence of child slaves in the farms they source their product from in Côte d'Ivoire, the Ivory Coast in Africa, one of the world's largest providers of cocoa beans, the essential ingredient in chocolate. With regard to the clothing industry, well, think back to how we began our business and human rights journey together. We noted the tragedy of Rana Plaza. On the 24th of April 2013, the Rana Plaza building in Bangladesh collapsed, killing over 1,000 workers, mostly underpaid women, working to sew, cut and produce the clothes you and I enjoy wearing from popular brands, H&M, Benetton and plenty of others. Consider what you paid for the pants, shoes or shirt you're wearing right now. How much do you think the actual garment workers in Bangladesh and elsewhere made it earned? A very small fraction. In the garment industries across South and Southeast Asia, where so many of our clothes are sourced from, these are predominantly female garment workers we are talking about, working in often unsafe health and work and labour conditions, underpaid and overworked. What to do? Well, as with so much of the story of businesses' human rights responsibilities, where there are prominent failures to protect human rights, there are also regulatory and legal responses. After Rana Plaza and the outrage heard around the world about the conditions these workers endured and then died in, major Western clothing firms, yes, look at the labels on the clothes that you're wearing right now, they resolved to do better, to be better, to respect the human rights of the workers in their supply chains. Several accords were signed, legal agreements committing corporate money to improve fire and building safety and workers' conditions across the Bangladeshi garment industry. Governments have even placed sanctions on products sourced in inhumane conditions too. For example, the United States just placed an import ban on Malaysian-produced plastic gloves. Now you might chuckle about this. Malaysia? Well, Malaysia is actually home to the world's largest glove manufacturer, Top Glove. After the US authorities uncovered credible evidence of modern slavery in their factories, they shut it down. They banned the importation of Malaysian gloves, even in the midst of a global COVID pandemic in 2021. A huge law move. Recall also that I commenced our journey in business's human rights responsibilities by talking about the Atlantic slave trade, a tragedy of epic proportions. Slavery has been banned, prohibited in most countries on the planet and under international human rights law, but it persists. Modern slavery is pervasive across many global supply chains. This is the main topic of conversation under this topic of our course together. What is modern slavery? And importantly, what should we be doing about it? In brief, modern slavery is the severe exploitation of workers for personal or commercial gain. When you think slavery, you may think of an enchained African worker on a Caribbean sugar plantation working under the boiling sun and whips, relegated to subhuman status, the property of the plantation owner. Horrific. Sadly, that type of slavery does still exist in corners of the globe, but perhaps the image of modern slavery is the overexploited worker, working long hours in horrendous conditions for minimal or no pay. Many are women, many are children. According to the International Labour Organization, more than 40 million people can nowadays be classed as modern slaves. Australia and other countries have resolved to do something about this human rights issue. And a few years back, we passed into law Australia's Modern Slavery Act, a piece of law that mandates all large Australian companies to conduct human rights due diligence all the way down their supply chain. They must look for instances of modern slavery. These companies are then responsible to issue annual public reports on what they uncover and what they'll be doing to address modern slavery in their supply chains. This law is clearly a step in the right direction to end modern slavery. However, it does have its critics. For instance, companies' legal responsibilities is just to report. The law does not mandate any action on the part of the companies. The law also lacks enforcement mechanisms. It lacks teeth. And in that sense, modern slavery is a classic case study for us to examine. The blatant abuses of human rights of workers, the civil society campaigns to draw attention to it, the law's response, the corporate response. As with so many business and human rights issues on so many levels, there's still more work to be done.